Hey guys, welcome back to the Triple Play. This is Danielle. I was here last year, but Katie and Trinity are now gone, so we have some new people this year. Like I said, my name's Danielle. I'm a sophomore here at UT. I'm studying journalism and electronic media, and I'm focusing on being a sideline reporter as well as a sports broadcaster for college and professional football, baseball, basketball, and hockey. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nathan Odom. Nathan, you can tell us some more about you.
I am also a journalism and electronic media major. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do, but maybe social media managing for like a guy that reports for football, or like a Go-To 47 type guy that reports on just one team or one school, something like that.
Awesome. And Colby?
Hi, I'm Colby Deering, and I'm a broadcasting and electronic media major as well. And I really like to be a radio host for a sports talk show.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. This year it's going to be a little different. We have multiple journalism students will be rotating in and out. So each week you'll get 2 new journalism students, and yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to go ahead and talk about what the Vols have done so far this year. It has been up and down, I guess you could say, especially with offense. But, so yeah, we just recently played Oklahoma, and that was a very interesting game. If you guys want to share some insight on that.
Oh gosh, it was great to watch, and then it was tough to watch, and then it was great to watch again, and it was tough to watch again. It was a little up and down game, but it was amazing to me how even though our offensive line was playing so poorly and we turned the ball over a couple times, that in the fourth quarter we were driving and it was still a game. It's like we were one touchdown from being right in with 10 minutes left in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were a lot of positive notes in it. I mean, I thought Justin Worley probably had maybe his best game of his career, but obviously the offensive line was a little. I don't even know how to describe it. Really, they were terrible, and I think there was things to look forward to, but there was also things that had to be fixed from the game. So I kind of look at it as a positive note because we learned from it.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right on there. Offensive line was a bit of a mess. Worley looked like he had a concussion. Still not completely sure what the word is on that, but yeah, 34-10 loss. That was pretty rough. But season started off strong at home, 2 wins. We beat Utah State 38-7 and beat Arkansas State 34-19. So those were really solid. This weekend we have we're going to be playing Georgia at noon in Athens. That should be a really interesting game. From the standpoint of what needs to be done in order to beat Georgia, I think it will definitely go back to the offensive line being a little bit stronger and more of a wall for Worley. I mean, Georgia is not a team that you can look at and think that's an easy game. It's never easy against Georgia. Look at last year's game against them, the heartbreak in Neyland. So that should be really fun. This week, some of the coaches were gone. So they weren't at practice with the players. They were out visiting recruits. I think, Nathan, you saw some story on that.
Yeah, Butch Jones went out and he saw Quinn Dormady in Texas. He had a really nice game at QB. Their team won dominant. He looked dominant. And then he went out and visited Shy Tuttle, defensive end recruit, who Tennessee is looking at. He commits this Friday, so we hope to get a big commit from him.
Yeah, I think Shy Tuttle, that's going to be it's the biggest one for this week that I'm looking at. I'm trying to see if there's gonna be like a little bit of insight, like a little like special sneak preview of who he's gonna be picking, but I haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, that would be really big after the defensive line groups we got this year, and we're still young and smaller compared to the rest of the conference, and the way that everybody else is big and matched up. Getting those recruits in and saying hey, look at us, and getting them in and built up, it'll be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and like the incoming class that we have coming. I mean, it's not that small of a class. It's pretty impressive. But his other schools of interest, North Carolina, Clemson, Miami, and NC State. So that should be really interesting. I think just looking at that list, if we had to pick someone as like our big competition, I personally would say Clemson. But I think North Carolina is ranked above us.
North Carolina, they seem to think it's between us and North Carolina, and a lot of people are actually pretty confident that he might be the most for sure guy we've gotten this year, besides maybe Khalil McKenzie, as far as coming down to the decision. So I think everybody's pretty excited because with him and McKenzie, that's quite a defensive tackle haul.
And it's been really impressive to see the coaching staff work on him because early this year in his recruitment, he was thought to be like a North Carolina lock, and especially with his family and so much in-state pressure to stay, at North Carolina or NC State, and they've worked on him, and over time you've seen people predict more and more, and Tennessee just grow on him, and I think Friday there's a lot of optimism going in, and I think you could see him definitely being a Vol after Friday.
Definitely. Going out into the SEC real quick, this weekend was a pretty weird weekend, I guess you could say, for the SEC. Florida and Bama. That was one of the sloppiest games I've ever seen from Alabama, and I don't really know how to critique that. It could be really great, or it could be really bad for us whenever we play them in a couple weeks. But yeah, that was just a weird game. Alabama came out and won, but at the end of the first quarter, it was tied 14-14, and I was getting a little worried there that Florida would just, take over, but didn't seem that way. So do you guys think that Bama performance was a big surprise, or was that kind of expected?
That first half was a real eye-opener. That just makes that SEC West, the powerful SEC West, a whole lot more interesting with the top teams out there, and especially later in the season for the Vols. Bama coming to Neyland. If they turn the ball over early like that and the crowd noise gets to them, that could be really big.
I mean, I think that the difference in Alabama this year is there's no A.J. McCarron anymore, and he wasn't really a big threat, but he was just such. He didn't lose the game for Alabama at all. And now this year, they've got some quarterback controversy. I think Blake Sims is kind of, they're not really sure what to think about him yet. So, but I mean, he had a great game. He almost threw for 500 yards against them. So, I think it's just going to be interesting to see. I think if Blake Sims ends up becoming, a decent quarterback for them, they're going to be tough because Derrick Henry and T.J. Yeldon and Kenyon Drake are obviously three great running backs for Alabama. So, we just have to see the quarterback play for Alabama this year.
Definitely. And going off of quarterbacks, Jeff Driscoll had a nightmare of a game. 9 for 28 for 93 yards, 2 interceptions and 1 touchdown. That's just, there was so much hype with Driscoll last year. Florida didn't play up to par, of course. There were a lot of injuries, but, just that stat, his stat line for this game was just, it's tough to look at. That's, really, it's not good. But, we don't really want to see Florida do well, but still, if it's in a game like this where we see our upcoming opponents, you really need to see what's going to happen. But that was just not the best game for Florida. The total yards numbers, too. Alabama had 645, and Florida only had 200, which is ridiculous.
And that was the most that I think Florida has ever allowed as a team. And after all the off-season hype and the coaches saying, Driscoll's our guy, and he'll be back and he'll be ready, and seeing him perform like that at Alabama in a big game, they need to perform well. It's could be interesting.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. Another interesting game that happened in the SEC was LSU losing to Mississippi State. I don't think anybody expected Mississippi State to be this good, this early on. It's kind of scary to think about, too, with Mississippi State. But they won 34-29 over LSU, which is pretty crazy. But looking at their stats, they had 570 total yards. I never would have expected that from Mississippi State in any year.
In Death Valley.
Yeah, especially in Death Valley. That's not an easy place to play at all. But, rushing, they just dominated LSU. They had 302 yards compared to LSU's 89, which, LSU, most of the time you wouldn't really think of them as, a really, fast, team anyways. But, passing, they still did really well. But to have, under 100 yards in rushing, that's not really something you're used to with LSU.
No, and they have no quarterback either, really. Anthony Jennings and Brandon Harris both aren't really proven quarterbacks. And another thing is, Mississippi State's quarterback Prescott, he threw for 268 yards on LSU, and LSU doesn't have the killer secondary like they're used to having back when they had Tyrann Mathieu and Patrick Peterson back there and so many guys. LSU's just kind of, they're starting to trend towards a downward spiral, and might not be some great years coming up for LSU, I think, in the future.
Definitely, and that's really surprising because LSU is usually a really consistent team in the not only in the SEC but in the NCAA in general. So it'll be really interesting to see how they do this year. Going outside of the SEC, we're going to take a quick look at the ACC because of the number one team, Florida State and Clemson, which I don't think anybody expected an overtime game. Of course, Jameis Winston was out due to some things that happened last week, which were very interesting. But still, it was a really Interesting matchup. I don't think anybody expected Clemson to really come out like they did.
No, they were a force on the defensive line. They've got some playmakers. They got Beasley, who's one of the best defensive linemen in the country, and they were wreaking havoc all night. And Florida State's offense, they didn't know what to do, and then when they knew what to do, it wasn't happening, and it just like all night it kept looking like Clemson was going to pull it off. And without Jameis Winston, their offense was just like, it was like, hey, look what Jameis Winston means to this team, and that's what everybody was saying. But they managed to pull out the win, which is the most important thing from that night.
I mean, it's no doubt that I think everybody can agree Winston's probably the best player in college football right now. He just does so many things well. But if you look at the stats, what's really interesting is Sean McGuire, their backup, he really carried them because they only had 13 yards rushing as a team. But McGuire threw for 305 and a score. He did have 2 picks, but, I mean, he really saved them. And, I don't think anybody expected Florida State to blow them out without Jameis, but it was definitely closer than everybody thought, especially as a home game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely going back to the numbers with the yards, what surprises me is how close the passing numbers were. 306 for Clemson and 305 for Florida State. I mean, of course, with Winston out, you expected the numbers for Florida State to still kind of be around average, but for Clemson to, like, stay that close to them in the passing range blew my mind. I think, like you said, Nathan, it really goes back to, like, what kind of strength Winston brings to the Seminoles, but in some ways you could say, like, most people look at them as still being contenders for the national championship since they won, but the big question is, can they make plays without Winston? Like, he could get hurt sometime later in the season. What will they do? How will McGuire take that into account? So, I mean, saying that all of their strength is based on Winston, yeah, that's, like, the biggest argument, but I'd say right now it's still too early to tell with him as well.
On the flip side of that, Clemson has a gem in Deshaun Watson.
Oh, yeah.
He played an incredible game, and he's looking more and more like the high school athlete that he was hyped up to be. And he just an incredible athlete. Threw the ball well all night. Didn't look rattled ever. Occasionally he did, and he got right back up. But tough game. We saw from Florida State without Jameis, and you never know if he goes down with an injury. What happens when they run across a better team? In the playoff. Without, that's 2 games they're playing if they win the first one against a really, really good team. So
yeah.
You never know. Another
close game that went on with another top team was Oregon and Washington State. I know I didn't expect it to be a touchdown, like, difference. I was expecting Oregon to just run over Washington State. Marcus Mariota threw 5 touchdowns. He had 5 touchdowns, I should say. That isn't really a surprise. I mean, he is a monster. Like, that's the fact that we all have to face. But I know some people are already saying that he is the top, he's in top contention for the Heisman. And I don't really think that's a surprise after last year. But, I mean, this performance, depending on the rest of the season, this could be the straw that, like, gives him the extra push for it.
And he keeps coming back, and he keeps getting better, and he shows it every week. Even with this team playing a tough game, and he just shows out. He's one of those guys that's a gem. He's incredible with the way he runs that offense and his ability to make plays.
Yeah, he definitely fits their scheme probably better than any quarterback they've had in a long time, besides maybe Dennis Dixon. But, I think you look at Oregon this year, as far as their running backs and receivers go, you don't really see that guy that really is your big-time playmaker like DeAnthony Thomas was. Or, when you look at those guys, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm like, I don't remember any of these guys from the past years. And, Devon Allen had a good game, but they're playing Washington State. You're not supposed to win by 7, especially if you're Oregon. That's teams they drop 50 or 60 on. So, we'll see if Oregon can get into the playoff this year because they're not looking so hot so far.
Another good point that you brought up talking about Washington State, you don't expect them to put up, like, high numbers with stats, especially against a team like Oregon, but their passing numbers, 436 yards in comparison to Oregon's 329. I haven't really watched Washington State play in a while. I think I was, like, younger whenever I'd watch them play. But for them to put up that many numbers in passing, I did not expect them to have a passing game at all, or even a rushing game for that point. I didn't really expect them to bring any game, to be quite honest. But, 436 passing yards, that is completely ridiculous. They still had 2 turnovers in comparison to Oregon's, 0, but just very, very surprising. Other games that happened all around college football to look at, Oklahoma beat West Virginia 45-33. not much of a surprise there. West Virginia is typically pretty inconsistent, so Texas A&M blew out SMU 58-6. That score just makes me laugh. I mean, I really thought SMU might try to bring a little bit of game, but they're 0-3 on the season, so not looking too good for them. Another big blowout, Michigan State against East Michigan, 73-14. That was crazy. I mean, Michigan State had 28 points to end the first quarter, so that's just ridiculous. I don't think I've ever seen that high of a scoring game in a while. Georgia just shut out Troy 66-0. Another big game. And then Wisconsin beat Bowling Green 68-17. I mean, I expected Wisconsin to come up with numbers like that, but I'm surprised that Bowling Green was able to kind of stay close with them in the first quarter.
School record rushing yards for Wisconsin. They ran the ball all over Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Melvin Gordon's a sleeper Heisman pick too, for sure.
Definitely.
He's definitely come out strong.
It'll be really interesting once we get into November and December, whenever we talk more about the Heisman race. That's usually a really fun topic on the show, so there's that to look forward to, and especially to see if any SEC guys will make it in this year. Right now, it's all kind of up in the air. It's looking like it might be somebody from the West, but we'll just keep an eye on that. Yesterday morning, news was broken that Rob Baronis passed away after a car wreck Saturday night. I'm pretty sure it took everybody by surprise. I mean, even people who aren't Titans fans. Like, I'm not a Titans fan. I'm a Steelers fan, but still, like, knowing that it's somebody who does have a connection to the Steelers organization. He was Terry Bradshaw's son-in-law, which was, it just took me by surprise. I mean, I know you that Nathan, you're a Titans fan. I'm sure that was really surprising for you.
Colby,
yeah,
you were too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Crazy, too, because Rob Baronis is, he's one of the best kickers to play in a while, too. I mean, he had a great leg, and it's very shocking.
36 years old, I think he was. That's really young.
It's really scary, but to go off of that, the Titans, I'm sure it was really tough for them to play with that news being broken early in the morning, but they played against Cincinnati. I watched the first half, and I couldn't watch the second half. It was a struggle for the Titans. They couldn't get anything right at all. They had scoring drives that they just could not capitalize on. But, I mean, playing in Cincinnati, not the easiest task.
No, but it was worrisome and sad at the same time to see late in the first half, rather. It was, I think, 19-0 Cincinnati. And at that time, the Titans were leading in total yards for the game. It was just kind of like, they're not capitalizing, they're not getting it done. And it was just a struggle to be moving the ball like that, and then all of a sudden down 19-0.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are a sleeper pick for a Super Bowl contender too, because the Bengals have looked good this year. They've got a lot of pieces, but I think the play that really summed up the game, I think everybody probably saw it, was Andy Dalton's touchdown reception he got. The cornerback, there's no way he shouldn't get that ball, and Andy Dalton just goes up and takes it from him. And Andy Dalton's not really the most athletic guy in the NFL, so the Titans just have a lot of problems right now.
And also going off of that play from Andy Dalton, most people, I mean, that was not something you'd expect to see, but what most people don't know is he made that exact same play in college. So it's nothing really new for him, but he was joking around. From one of the articles I read, he was joking around at the beginning of the week during practice saying, okay, who's going to catch the first touchdown? Will it be one of the receivers or will it be me? So ended up, he scored the first touchdown, which is just shocking. But, I mean, yeah, you're definitely right, Colby. The Bengals are definitely a team to keep an eye on. They were a team to watch out for last year, too, in the playoff race. But usually people watch out for the AFC North in general. So I would definitely watch out for the Bengals this year. It should be really exciting. Another super exciting game that wasn't – everybody had the hype with it, but it ended up being way more exciting than intended was the Broncos and Seahawks. Broncos were struggling a bit in the first half. Peyton he didn't look like the normal Peyton we're all used to. Just the offense in general was just really struggling, but second half, fourth quarter especially, Peyton blew it up. He was Mr. Clutch as usual.
You could see after struggling all game to move the ball, and you thought after that late fourth down conversion that they didn't get, and you're like, well, maybe not. And then Peyton gets the ball back, I think 80 yards in 40 seconds is what he went.
Right.
You just a little reminder, he can do it again.
Yeah, I thought what was crazy was how they just threw the ball over the Seahawks' fabulous secondary there in the last 40 seconds. I mean, he was just throwing bombs, and the Seahawks were just losing their defenders. And I kind of feel like the Seahawks maybe got exposed on a 2-minute drive or something because they did not look good. And then the 2-point conversion, that's one of the best catches I've seen in a long time because there was no way he shouldn't have gone out of bounds right there. I think it was Demaryius Thomas caught it, and the footwork he used on that play was ridiculous.
I wish Peyton would have got a chance in overtime because that would have been really interesting to see. After that quick drive to score, they had all the momentum and they went into overtime. Wish they would have got a chance.
And that's
what seen what he'd done.
That's what I hate about the NFL. I think that the college overtime system is a perfect overtime system, and I just feel like you're putting the game on a coin toss too much. And they've changed it to you guys score a touchdown, but I mean, they're paid to score touchdowns. Like you're a professional. That's usually what they do. I just think that it should be the back and forth system.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. That was one thing I was thinking about last night. I know towards the end of the game, whenever Seattle intercepted during the fourth quarter, Peyton just went back to the sideline. He kept his helmet on. He was just going through the playbook, and I thought that was no surprise. I mean, that's what Peyton does. Like, he just stays focused, but I definitely think that if he could have had a chance in overtime, we could have seen sparks. But, I mean, the fourth quarter in general for Denver, they scored 17 points. That's ridiculous. It's not a big surprise because, I mean, that's just how Peyton is, but very impressive.
On Seattle's very hyped defense.
Oh, yeah.
They played well most of the game.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it was fitting that the tying touchdown was over Richard Sherman. So everybody knows Richard Sherman is just, well, he's Richard Sherman.
Those, you love him or you hate him, guys.
Exactly. And I'm sure that if they would have just, like, completely stopped Denver, he might have said a few things. That's also just an assumption, but could be accurate. But I just thought that was very fitting. But passing in general, there were 296 yards for Denver in comparison to Seattle's 255, which not much of a surprise, pretty close there. Seattle's rushing game dominated the Broncos 129-36 with those yards. Turnovers for Denver, 2 turnovers, which is pretty crazy, but also an interception thrown by Peyton, like we said, and it was the first one since I want to say like 2012 or something like that, or maybe even longer than that.
I don't remember how many.
It'd been like 100 and something games,
yeah.
I think. But, I mean, that was ridiculous. But, I mean, there were some guys who really just showed their stuff, especially Jacob Tamey, who got that pass to tie the game. I thought that was really interesting. And, of course, he played at Kentucky. It's always nice to see SEC guys really showing up. But, yeah, that's just a player you don't really hear a lot about. But it was really cool to hear that from him. So, yeah, I mean, Super Bowl matchup ended up being as exciting as people were hoping for since the Super Bowl was not all that exciting. Another team that's been kind of surprising going back to the AFC North is Cleveland this year. They've kept all of their games close. Granted, they've lost 2 of them. They've gone 1-2. They beat the Saints last week, which was still a surprise by 2 points. But this game was also a 2-point game against the Ravens. I mean, I know most people were looking at this game thinking the Ravens were just going to blow them out, like, right out of the water. But that was a really big surprise. Cleveland put up some pretty good numbers, 284 passing yards, which is kind of a surprise, and none of those came from Johnny Manziel, who everybody is still waiting for, but he's only had 1 attempt in this whole season. So, I mean, the hype that was with him could slowly be dwindling.
Well, speaking of, it's kind of a shame that that whole game was almost overshadowed by the one play that the replay that everybody saw, the trick play that was ruled ineligible. It's actually against the rules, but over there arguing with the coach because the Cleveland Browns actually played a pretty good game, and they've played 2 games in a row where they've played pretty well, 2 good teams, and so you could see maybe in the next couple weeks or the next year or 2, we could see them make a surge in the AFC North. Yeah,
I mean, I think Cleveland's really on the up and come, and I'm one of the biggest Johnny football fans there is. But, I mean, Brian Hoyer has played really well this year. He's done a great job. And, they drafted – I'm not sure if they drafted Isaiah Crowell in the late rounds or maybe signed him as a free agent. But, I mean, everybody knew Crowell could play when they saw him at Georgia. He's been playing very well for the Browns, actually. He might even become their feature back. But I think the Browns are a decent team. And, I think they got a shot to maybe go 8-8 this year. They look good.
8-8 usually, like – most teams look at that, it's like, that's horrible. But that could be a really big improvement for the Browns. I mean, they definitely could use it.
And a tough division on top of that.
Yeah, very tough division. Staying in the division, Steelers played last night against Carolina. very crazy game. First half was not pretty. All of the points on the board came from kicking teams, so that was really exciting. Sean Sweesham, of course, just for the Steelers, he's pretty much putting the team on his back as usual. Big surprise, but very exciting game, especially for Steeler fans. Offense looked incredible in the second half, and we hadn't scored a touchdown since September 7th. It had been 6 quarters without a touchdown, which is not pretty for Pittsburgh, but hey, not all things can be perfect, I guess. Antonio Brown was killer last night. He had a touchdown in the corner, like the back corner of the end zone, and it was just his toes. Like, I mean, it looked like Santonio Holmes out there. I had to look twice. But that was awesome. Le'Veon Bell really was insane last night. He had I want to say he had an 80-yard run at one point, which was the longest in Steelers recent history since Willie Parker back in, I want to say 2006 or something. But yeah, it was nice to see the Steelers kind of doing well again, but Carolina really came out as a surprise. I mean, they played a lot better than I was really expecting, but I expected more out of Cam Newton.
I thought a couple things that I noticed. Second half, Steelers offense played really well. Big Ben looked like old Big Ben.
Yeah.
Antonio Brown still playing lights out. That's the guy that's come on. But for the Carolina side, it's that the defense that they've been prized for the past year and a half, it lacked to show that energy and that stop in the second half. And they got a couple of red zone stops and stops for field goals in the first half. And then you could really tell on offense the type of receiver talent they lost in the offseason. Because Cam was looking, and he had Kelvin Benjamin and Greg Olsen a couple times, but other than that, he didn't have a lot of time in the pocket, and he was being rushed, and it just kind of looked rough a lot of the game for him.
Yeah, Cam had an all right game. He threw for 250 yards, but it's just with him, you just really expect him to carry a team because he's capable of doing it. But, the Panthers were really hurt with D'Angelo Williams was out for the game and didn't get to play. But, yeah, I'm still a little confused as why the Panthers would let Steve Smith go because he's just such a good receiver. But I will say that, Kelvin Benjamin, being a rookie, even though he was Florida State's go-to guy last year, he's going to be a stud. He had 115 receiving yards last night, and he's just a big target with good hands, and he runs good routes, and he's decently fast. And I think Kelvin Benjamin's going to be one of the best receivers in the NFL very soon.
Definitely, and looking around the NFL a little bit more, of course, the Bears and Jets played tonight. That should be a really interesting game. Both teams are 1-1. I'm expecting the Bears to win, but anything's possible right now with the NFL. Everything's kind of still just going crazy. Falcons beat Buccaneers on Thursday night, 56-14, which was just insane. I mean, Matt Ryan was crazy, 21 for 24 with 286 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not much of a surprise from him. He's a great quarterback, but very good numbers for him. The Cowboys beat the Rams 34-31, close game that I don't think most people were expecting to be that close and that high scoring for those two teams. So that was really surprising. Eagles and Redskins was a really close game as well, 37-34 with the Eagles winning. The Giants beat the Texans 30-17 last night. And a little fact that I saw yesterday, out of the Manning brothers, the only one with an interception this season is Peyton, which is just, it's Twilight Zone right now. Bengals beat the Titans, like we said, 33-7. That was an interesting game. Saints beat the Vikings 20-9. And the Packers lost to the Lions 19-7, which I was not expecting that. I thought the Packers would really just come out and be really strong, but that was a very, very big surprise. And the Patriots beat the Raiders 16-9. Not much of a surprise there, but yeah. So moving over to the MLB, October's coming fast, and it's a beautiful time in the season. Right now, looking at the playoffs, we're expecting to see Baltimore in there, Detroit, the Angels, some Nationals, Cardinals, which I'm sure Colby's very happy about, and the Dodgers, who have really just... They've done so well this year. I've been really surprised by that. But looking at the wild card standings, for the American League right now, the A's and the Royals look like they're pretty much locked in. Seattle's a game and a half back for the wild card. But, I mean, Seattle's the kind of team that can really just turn things around and get up there if they need it. Cleveland's right behind them at 3.5 games, which is a little surprising to me. But, I mean, the Yankees are 4.5 games out of the wild card race, which is heartbreaking for me. I'm a Derek Jeter fan, and I really just wanted them to win the World Series this year for him because he's retiring. It's not going to be the same without the captain, but oh well. And looking at the National League, Pittsburgh and the Giants are leading that. I'm a Pirates fan, so that makes me very, very, very happy to see them again in October, for Bucktober as we call it.
Makes me the only unhappy man in the room when it comes to MLB.
Right, because your Braves are 8 games back, which...
They're out.
Oh, they're out now.
They're officially
Ooh.
eliminated yesterday.
Ouch.
And this morning, just a couple hours ago actually, they fired Frank Wren, the general manager.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of fans that want more, and I think there were more coaches that are going to be let go or moved. But one name that people keep saying, Freddie Gonzalez, is the manager. He hasn't shown, that why we brought him here reason. And a lot of people are calling for his head, and there's a couple of sources saying that he's not going anywhere, which have been not making Braves fans happy. I'm not sure how I feel. I guess maybe if I paid more attention to this season, I would be a lot sadder, but I would probably know what's going on right now. But just a disappointing end to the season,
Yeah.
and sad to see Frank Wren go. But if they say that change is necessary, then we'll see how it goes.
Right. Also, a big surprise that in the National League, Milwaukee started the season so strong. They were leading the NL Central for the longest time, but now they're 4.5 games out. That's just a big surprise. I really expected the Brewers to have a surprise season, but Cardinals took over as usual in the NL Central, so that's really exciting. But October is fast approaching, and it's going to be a really interesting playoff this year. Quick mention for other UT sports. The women's soccer team played ETSU last night. That was expected to be a pretty big matchup, especially with it being in-state. I didn't hear an official score on that. Did either of you?
No, I was caught up in the NFL. The ETSU Lady Vols women's soccer game last night. I think, I could guess either way, 50-50. I'm thinking that UT wins because I'm optimistic like that.
Yeah. I'm looking up the score right now. They won 3-0, which is exciting. That brings their overall record for the season up to 5-4. They had a game against Texas A&M last week and 3-0 shutout. Texas A&M won that. That was kind of a surprise, but wasn't really sure what to expect with the Aggies soccer program. But very exciting game. Otherwise, the soccer team looks pretty strong this year. I think most people are expecting a pretty strong end of the season. Hopefully that's what we'll get out of them. Going over to women's volleyball, they played Montana State on Saturday and they won 3-0. They're 7-7 on the season so far, and they will be playing Friday at Arkansas. So that should be an interesting matchup. Hopefully they can come out strong. They've been strong the past couple of years, but yeah, hopefully things will start looking up for them. That's all we have this week. Join us next week. We'll talk more about UT football. We'll cover the Georgia game. Look forward to the Florida game that week, and talk more about the NFL, and then hopefully talk about MLB playoffs, which should be set in stone by then. So that's all for this week. We'll see you next week.